I do really like that whip thing though. That's just such a cool idea, and whoever thought up that weapon, I mean, kudos. That's one of the coolest anti-lightsaber weapons we've seen. Hi there, I'm Matt Easton. I'm a martial arts instructor specialising in sword fighting, and I'm here to look at the Star Wars sequel movies and analyse some of the lightsaber combat that we see there. Sort of flailing this around as someone who doesn't really know what they're doing with a lightsaber, which is correct. That's kind of what we want, isn't it? Because he's not supposed to be knowing what to do with a lightsaber. As for the stormtrooper, this seems to me to be a particularly really idiotic weapon to face lightsabers, but it has some things going for it. So first of all, it's clearly based on a tonfa, which is a side-handled baton, and supposedly quite useful for self-defense against bladed weapons. So it's a kind of truncheon that you can use for knife defense, essentially. Does it make any sense against a lightsaber? Not an awful lot. I suppose it's a sort of law enforcement baton that can protect you from a bladed weapon. But there's some problems here. First of all, who is this supposed to be used against? Is this just for general riot use, for use against unruly planet uprisings? I don't think this is specialized to be used against lightsabers. If so, it's very short and doesn't seem to have much offensive value. But one thing that's interesting about it, which goes against that, is that it's clearly lightsaber proof. So whatever this is made of, it's not able to be cut through by a lightsaber. At that point, you have to wonder, well, if they're dishing out batons to people that are lightsaber proof, why don't they make the stormtroopers' armor lightsaber proof? There are so many questions here, but anyway, let's get back to the fight. So it does have what's essentially like a force push. It has a kind of repulsion effect to it, and this is pretty good. What I do like is actually we see Finn actually being quite ruthless here. When he's swinging for that stormtrooper, it doesn't look like he's holding back, and if that stormtrooper hadn't blocked those cuts would have ploughed straight through that armor and straight through that stormtrooper. So pretty ruthless, actually, I think, considering how the character's generally portrayed.
It belongs to me. Come get it.
When this first came out, I can remember there was all sorts of controversy about these exhaust ports that looked like a crossguard, and everyone was going, oh, but lightsabers don't have crossguards, it makes no sense, blah, blah, blah. And people really lost their proverbial over this. And, you know, on my channel, I defended this. I said, well, you know, why not? Throughout the Star Wars movies, not even to mention the things outside the movies, we know that there are materials that can stop lightsabers. For a start, the actual material of the lightsaber handle seems to be able to contain the energy and the beam coming out. But then we've also got things which stop them. The staffs that Grievous's bodyguard use, certain pieces of armor seem to stop lightsabers. Darth Vader's own armor, when he's hit by Luke in Cloud City and Bespin, seems to mostly stop lightsaber cutting through. And equally, we've seen the troopers, the stormtroopers in these sequels, they carry sticks or batons which seem to block lightsabers. So there are definitely materials that can block lightsaber blades. So why don't lightsabers have handguards on them? It would seem to be such a good idea. Look at the number of people that get their arms or wrists or hands wounded or chopped off by lightsabers in these movies. Why don't they have handguards? It would be such a good idea. But Kylo Ren's lightsaber finally has something that's like a handguard with an offensive potential to it as well. So why would people hate on that? It's a great idea. So I have to say, Finn, for someone who's had no swordsmanship training and certainly no lightsaber training, he actually seems relatively adept with his lightsaber. Attacks are pretty much easy to do. Anyone knows how to swing a stick or a baseball bat, but he actually does pretty good blocks. Kylo Ren looks pretty much like he's not bothered. Yeah, this guy's an easy opponent to beat, but he's carrying a wound, and that's very, very important from a Wookiee bowcaster. Now, Wookiee bowcasters, we know, are things that blast stormtroopers across a room, but Kylo Ren took one to the gut and wandered off. I really like the way how Kylo dodges there. It's actually really, really well done. Finn is swinging the lightsaber really like a full blow. Yeah, it's a bit wide motion, but he's not supposed to be trained. He's supposed to be he really, really wants to kill Kylo Ren. So he's really swinging for the fences and he's really putting energy into it, and it looks like a convincing cut. And Kylo just slips off to the side out of the way. He's toying with this guy. It's easy. It's an easy opponent to beat. So that's represented well and accurately. Yeah, and then we actually see that crossguard not just having a defensive potential, but an offensive potential as well. And I should mention that real crossguards on real swords can be used offensively. They can be jammed into people's face or throat at close distance. It's like a knuckle duster plus 10 because it's pointy and long and projects out. So yeah, absolutely. This is great that they represented the use of the crossguard offensively. So I absolutely love the fact that they show the damage being done to the trees, and then there's that slash that just glances off Kylo Ren's shoulder. It skims off, so you know I don't have a problem with the minimal amount of damage that did. And then he just disarms Finn and sends the lightsaber flying off the side. That's nice. These kinds of disarms, incidentally, they can be done. They're actually really quite difficult, and they involve a circular movement while moving the blade towards the person as well. But if you've got contact with the opponent's blade, absolutely you can do a disarm like this. They're just very technical. Ooh, so that's a rising cut. And I really liked the fact that they made a rising cut because they don't show rising cuts an awful lot, but swordsmanship systems, whether it's Japanese, European, Chinese, whatever, do use rising cuts. They're less powerful than downwards cuts because of the body mechanics involved, but absolutely if your weapon happens to have just traveled down low and you're close, you can come straight back up with that cut. And the fact that it comes straight up Finn's back, you really know that that is a really horrible fight-ending wound, possibly a fatal wound as well. So I like the way it's shown, I like the type of cut, and the body mechanics look quite well executed as well. Rey's character is essentially untrained at this point-ish, but we do know that she used a staff, and that's a very big difference between her and Finn, is that she grew up fending for herself on a desert planet, Jakku. We know that she carried a staff around. We know that she is at least self-taught in hand-to-hand combat. So number one, we know that she can use hand weapons and has done probably many times in the past while growing up. Secondly, and this is really super important, unlike Finn, we know that she is strong in the Force, because the fact is she has got certain foresight and certain instincts and certain reflexes and reactions which are above and beyond what we have. So we can forgive her for having a certain degree of innate skill and ability beyond what any of us would have if we just picked up a lightsaber, never having learned swordsmanship before. Now, do you notice that little twirl, the little twirl that Kylo likes to do there? That very much harks back to the prequels, and it's not something we really see in the original trilogy. So it's just a little bit of a taste. It's not as bad in these sequels, but it's a little bit of a reminder that the prequels loved twirling their lightsabers, and it's almost like it's like joining the dots between the old school original trilogy lightsaber combat and the prequel lightsaber combat, which was very wushu kung fu, very twirly, flippy, spinny, pirouette-y. So perhaps it's a little sort of tip of the hat to that. Right, one of the first things I have to say, and I said this to my friends when I first saw this, I love the fact that Rey opens up with a thrust. That's actually within the big corpus of Star Wars material, relatively unusual. And one of the things I like about the sequel fights is we do see quite a bit of thrusting. And we don't see very much thrusting at all in the prequels. I also like the fact that they deliberately have Rey looking like a noob, basically. They have her over swinging. The thrusts are uncontrolled. They're full of rage. They're not direct. They're not precise. So she looks like she's wielding something which is too heavy for her and she doesn't really know how to control. Now, obviously it's not heavy because it's a lightsaber, but I do like the fact that they tried to inject some of this in, that Rey doesn't look composed. She looks untutored, untrained, and a little bit wild. So there's a little flourish there going down that little gully where Kylo Ren just goes full attack mode and Rey is just defend, 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 defend. Now there's a few interesting things to unpack there actually if we're going to analyze it, because number one, he's decided to go on full attack, presumably to incapacitate her. He does look like he's actually trying to hit her, which is good from a viewer's point of view. I guess that shows at this point he's not necessarily concerned about capturing her or trying to turn her or anything like that. She's trying to hit her. She, on the other hand, is defend, defend, defend. Now, her defenses are very composed and very good for someone who's never used a lightsaber before. But number one, we remember she is trained in close combat with the staff. And secondly, she does have force powers. From a defensive stay alive point of view, I think it's good that her instincts kicked in and she seems to be able to defend pretty well. From a fencing point of view, it's not usually a good idea to defend, 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 defend continuously. What you really want to be looking to do is defend, respond, which is called a riposte. So parry, riposte. You really want to take the fight back towards the person. One of the things I like about the way that Kylo Ren moves his sword is actually he strikes with all angles. And remember that there are no edges with a lightsaber, everything is an edge. So normally when we cut, we have to make sure the edge is pointing in the right direction, and we have to change the direction of the blade if we cut from a different angle. But with a lightsaber, you could literally just wiggle it and it would cut from any direction. And if you watch some of the alignment of some of Kylo's moves, they are good cuts in terms of body mechanics, but he's not always cutting with the edge. But that's fine because it's a lightsaber. So I was a little bit bothered by the fact that that Kylo Ren is doing wild swings, and so is Rey. I think there should have been more of a contrast between the two, and I think they should have had Rey making the wild, desperate swings, trusting to animal instinct and adrenaline alone, whereas Kylo Ren is supposed to be trained. Now, we subsequently find out he's actually not that trained, but he is supposed to have been a member of Luke's academy, and then later on, obviously, trained by other people as well. So he is supposed to have been trained in fencing, essentially, using a lightsaber. He just loses his cool. Now, I know this is partly part of his character. He is an overgrown kid who's completely ruled by his emotions and is completely out of control. I can understand why, but I think in terms of the fight, it would have looked better and made more martial sense if it had looked like Kylo was toying, almost torturing Rey, and Rey was flailing trying to stay alive while he was focused like a hawk or a cat on its prey. And instead, they have him looking desperate. It undermines him as a character. It makes him look weak and it makes him look unskilled.
You need a teacher.
So yet again, it's the Star Wars trope of having a bind where the two blades are against each other and then they have a long conversation. I completely understand from a movie maker point of view why they have this. In reality, when two blades are against each other like this, there are countless things you can do that would instantly wound the other person or get you out of that situation. Cuts and thrusts, kicks and elbows and punches and grabs and disarms, but it enables them to have a conversation. Kylo stays there so long in this bind while he was trying to have a conversation with Rey that enables her to go into a state of meditation while keeping this bind, during which time, incidentally, either of them, but Kylo specifically, could have done anything. Doesn't need to stay there. Her grip on the lightsaber here is wacky, and in recent years there have been a lot of movies that have liked to reverse grip on the sword so it's sticking out downwards instead of upwards from the hand. Yeah, whatever. I'm not a fan of it. It's something you very occasionally see in real swordsmanship systems. It doesn't generally work great with swords except in very specific scenarios, and usually, incidentally, for thrusting, for stabbing, not for cutting. For cutting, it's really bad. But anyway, that's what they decide to do, and she does a series of figure eight, very repetitive, easy to deal with cuts, but this really takes Kylo Ren by surprise. Well, you know, yeah, that kind of works, doesn't it? Band down for a long time, hit something down there, it wasn't really clear what she hit, and then hit him in the face. Bad luck, Kylo. First up, as this fight starts, the one thing I want to say is I love the variety of weapons and I love the setup and the scenario. Fighting back to back, good idea. If you're surrounded by opponents and you've got a colleague, then you want to be back to back like they are, but equally you want to make sure that you don't hit each other. And when we do multiple opponent scenarios, one of the biggest problems is that you do hit each other in training. So trying not to hit each other while trying to defend yourself and fight against the people attacking you is really difficult, but you know, these guys have got the Force, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay, one of the first things we see here is what we inevitably always see, unfortunately, in these sorts of fights, and that is the attackers take turns. That's because there's no other way to do it in a movie fight. In reality, they'd all attack at the same time. You can't defend yourself against all of those attacks in the same moment. You're going to get hit. In this scenario, they have to show the heroes, or the people we don't want to die yet, being able to defend themselves one after the other, after the other, after the other. So the attacks have to come in a sequence, one after the other. And unfortunately, in some cases, if you watch carefully in the scene, you can see some of the people waiting for their turn to give the attack. They're literally standing there doing nothing, waiting until it's their turn to attack. I do really like that whip thing though. That's just such a cool idea, and whoever thought up that weapon, I mean, kudos. That's one of the coolest anti-lightsaber weapons we've seen. Now that was a cool move, okay? I actually just don't care how it works, if it would work, if it makes sense. It just looks super cool. And there are things like that in these sequel films where they did have a really nice technique pulled off. And I absolutely love that one. And I love also that it's a lightsaber thrust going through the armor, through the person's body. Lightsabers should be used to thrust. Why not? They're penetrating plasma rods. So yeah, I absolutely love that little bit. So hold on. So you've got a staff weapon, okay? So you've either ordered or had made for you to your special requests, because you're like a uber elite commando type trooper. You've said, I want a staff weapon, but I also want it to be able to break in half as soon as I get into combat. So why do you have a staff weapon if its only purpose is to be split apart and used as two separate weapons? So the crossguard being used there. So here's another good use of the crossguard. The crossguard doesn't only protect the hands from incidental hits, it doesn't only get used defensively, it's also used to bind. And this is really, really nice because Kylo Ren has put his lightsaber with its crossguard into the opponent's pole weapons, and it actually means he's got something to push against there, something to bind against with that crossguard, which you wouldn't have. You wouldn't be able to do this technique with a normal lightsaber. So that was a beautiful bit of choreography actually. 3 opponents with Kylo Ren in the middle. I love the fact that the cut, you actually graphically see the helmet and presumably the head inside in 2 halves. I actually think that was a really, really nicely done bit of choreography. Class bit of thinking and logic there. I really, really like it. The position that she's in, she can't utilize her lightsaber. In reality, she could turn the wrist around and hit like this quite easily, but we're supposed to assume she can't use her lightsaber from this angle. So dropping it and then getting the arm out and going underneath and grabbing it. What a lovely detail. It's just a great bit of imaginative fight choreography. And I'm actually a big fan of that. Why do people not use lightsabers like that more often, more like a shooting weapon? Because someone can't even see a small handle in your hand, and so just quickly switching it on and off again, just shoots straight through. It can't be blocked, not really anyway, and you don't really see it coming. Amazing. So I actually quite like the dodging thing there, because it's showing Kylo Ren to be, you know, very physically adept, have a very good judgment of distance and placement. And Rey does look like she is intending to chop him in half. She does look like she is genuinely trying to kill him, and he's just dodge, which honestly would be extremely difficult to do in reality. So it really shows his skills. So notice there, Rey does the little twirl again. We're back to the old twirl, which first appeared in the prequels, and they've kept them all the way through. There is a lot of times in the prequels and sequels where people just twirl the lightsaber for no reason at all. They're not just about to attack, they're not even in distance, they just do it. It's always the same twirl as well. So physically, I quite like the fact that they're showing Rey using the lightsaber in one hand quite a lot. I also like the fact that they're making Rey look very physically determined and confident. Probably, well, definitely more so than we've ever seen Rey before. And of course, this is part of the storytelling. From that side of the sword fight, if we're going to call it that so far, it's already sort of a narrative success, because they're already showing Rey has evolved and she is now hardcore, she is now tough. I like the way that Rey in particular switches between one-handed and two-handed. That is something that we see in certain historical systems, certain martial arts systems. Kylo's predominantly two-handed, but both of them are looking very fierce and confident in this fight. So I like the feel of it. They are swinging for the fences. They are swinging quite wide compared to real swordsmanship. That being said, battlefield situations are far from ideal, and when the blood's up, when the adrenaline's flowing, people do swing wild. I think that's fine. I think that's excusable. They are wide swings, they're not perfect fencing, but this isn't supposed to be perfect fencing. So Rey does like to pirouette, turn on the spot, and they are slightly guilty of the prequel sword fighting problem of standing on the spot and duking it out with lots of cuts and thrusts. And the fact is that people move around in reality, and you want to move in and out of distance. You want to try and move in to hit and then move out, so it's harder for the opponent to hit you back. You don't normally just stand rooted to the spot and hit, but that's what's happening here. Oh, reverse grip, no! So I have to tell you, I mean, I'm sure that lots of people that watch these movies don't care, they think it looks cool, whatever. They've watched Zaitochi or anything else with a reverse grip. It just drives us mad. For those of us, whether it's people that do Japanese swordsmanship, European swordsmanship, Indian swordsmanship, whatever, seeing people repeatedly in Hollywood movies hold a sword with the point down and then cut with it, it's just excruciating to watch. It's a terrible way to try and cut with the sword. You do occasionally find a reverse grip used for a very specific purpose, but not like this. Oh, it's just terrible to watch. I've got to say, I like that finished with a thrust again. It somehow works in a way that a cut wouldn't. And of course, in terms of the ratings, they couldn't show a human being chopped in half. It enables them to show a slightly more sanitized wound, I guess. But it would be totally fatal. I mean, we've seen what cuts do, but imagine what a lightsaber thrust through someone's body. In terms of him dropping his weapon, I mean, that's a character choice, isn't it? And she caught it and then finished him off. I can't really say that this is a sword fighting technique. It's a part of the story. Do you know what? For all of the criticism, I still had fun watching the fight.
We hope you've enjoyed this video, but if you haven't seen our previous Expert Reacts with Matt Easton, where he breaks down both the original and prequel trilogies, well, make sure to give those a watch for even more Star Wars lightsaber goodness.